The tavern was a symphony of life, a cacophony of laughter, clinking mugs, and animated conversations. Yet to Alaric, it was a distant murmur, a backdrop to his own silent reverie. Oblivious to the sympathetic glances from the people of Caldera, he clenched his empty mug, his focus on the vacant chair across from him. In his mind, he saw her, a ghostly apparition of his beloved, her form as familiar as the back of his hand. Her lips curved into a smile, her eyes sparkling with mirth as she recounted a tale from their shared past. "I couldn't believe it," she seemed to say. "If they told me what they really needed yarrow for, I would have prepared a proper tonic instead. But no, Edgar tells me his son wounded himself playing, so I prepared a poultice." A soft, ethereal laugh followed. "Turns out it was actually for Edgar to treat his diarrhea. My, that must have been bitter going down." A ghost of a smile tugged at Alaric's lips, the memory warming his heart, but as quickly as it came, it vanished, replaced by a more recent, more painful memory. Her once vibrant features were now gaunt and pale, her brilliant blue eyes fading as life slipped away from her. Alaric jolted back to reality, his breath ragged. He looked around, meeting the eyes of several familiar faces, offering pitying nods and smiles. A knot formed in his throat, a deep ache resonating within him. He quickly stood, grabbing his shield. Without a word, he left the tavern, the echo of his past trailing behind him. Once a sanctuary of shared warmth and laughter, their home now echoed with the silence of solitude. Despite the fire crackling in the hearth, a chill seemed to permeate the house, seeping into its very bones, mirroring the cold void within him. Alaric moved through the rooms like a ghost, his presence barely disturbing the stillness. In the night's quiet, he found himself in their room, her side of the bed untouched since she left. His fingers traced the delicate embroidery of her dress, still hanging by the wardrobe. The fabric, though cold, carried her scent, a mix of lavender and the earthy smell of the herbs she loved. Each whiff was a sharp reminder of her, a pang that twisted his heart. Each day in Alaric's life echoed the last, forming a haunting cycle of moments. His existence felt like a constant battle against an internal storm, an endless pain of sorrow. Yet in these quiet moments, when he could feel her presence in the remnants of their shared life, he found a semblance of solace. One day, as he was leafing through one of her old herbology tomes, a piece of parchment slipped from between its pages and fluttered onto his lap. His weathered hands picked it up, unfolding it carefully under the flickering candlelight. It was an old folktale, the inked words dancing in the dim light, telling a haunting tale about the forest witch of Eldenwood. The story was a familiar one, a piece of their childhood that had often been shared on chilly nights huddled around a fire. Back then, it was nothing more than a tale to keep the children from straying too far into the woods. Now, as he traced the words, the tale took on a new meaning. In the margins, his wife's neat handwriting caught his eye, spotted similar white flowers in Eldenwood last spring, petals matched description in tale. Local lore speaks of a healer in the forest around the same era. Could be our witch? The note was brief, but it was enough. As he stared at the worn script, he found himself gripped by a desperate hope. The tales painted the witch as a powerful sorceress who could grant any wish, but for a terrible price. They warned of her deceptive nature and of the danger that came with meddling in her magic, and despite all of its foolishness, if there was even the tiniest chance. He looked out the window towards the gloomy forest that bordered the town. It looked menacing in the moonlight, but the weight of his grief was heavier. With a last glance at the parchment, Alaric rose from his chair, his mind filled with thoughts of the witch and his desperate wish to have her back. As he packed a small bag with food and water, the first rays of dawn filtered through the gloom, casting long shadows on the empty room. The day had begun, and so would his journey to the witch. The journey into the heart of Eldenwood was a test of endurance and resolve. The forest stood as an imposing labyrinth of towering trees and dense undergrowth. Each day, Alaric pushed through the thick foliage, the sharp bristles scratching against his skin, leaving behind a trail of crimson reminders of his passage. The forest floor was a carpet of fallen leaves and twigs, crunching under his heavy boots, their decayed scent mingling with the fresh aroma of pine and damp earth. The forest was alive with sounds that were both familiar and foreign. The rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the eerie silence that would occasionally fall, all played a symphony that kept him on edge. At night, the forest transformed into a cacophony of unsettling noises, the howls of unseen creatures, hints of lurking dangers, the wind carrying tales of the forest's past, all echoed in the darkness, amplifying his solitude. The moonlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting a ghostly glow on the forest floor, creating shifting shadows that danced and played tricks on his weary eyes. Yet through it all, Alaric persevered. The thought of seeing her face again, feeling her touch and warmth, fueled his determination. Each step he took, each obstacle he overcame, brought him ever hopefully closer to the mythical forest witch of Eldenwood. And then, one day, he stumbled upon a clearing. Amid the endless expanse of trees stood a small, odd-looking hut, a peculiar sight amongst the towering, age-old trees of Eldenwood. The hut was surrounded by a small garden filled with various herbs and plants. Among them, a cluster of odd white flowers caught his eye, their petals glowing softly in the dappled sunlight. They were unlike any he had seen before, their beauty captivating in its simplicity. The hut, an anomaly in the wild forest, served as a beacon of hope in his weary journey. Standing before the curious dwelling, Alaric's heart pounded in his chest. The world hushed around him, as if the forest held its breath in anticipation. He rapped on the door hesitantly, his knock echoing in the eerily quiet clearing. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing a young woman with raven hair and piercing green eyes. Her gaze was predatory, her stance assertive. Alaric blinked, taken aback. When his eyes reopened, the youthful figure was gone. In her place stood a frail old woman, yet that hungry gaze and those emerald eyes remained the same. She invited him in with a crooked finger. Warily, Alaric stepped into the hut. The interior was cozy, lined with shelves of arcane knickknacks and antiquated books. The scent of herbs hung thick in the air, a comforting fragrance of rosemary and thyme interlacing with something he couldn't identify. The witch gestured for him to take a seat at a small round table. Pouring a steaming brew into 2 cups, she handed one to Alaric. The tea was warm in his hands, and as he took a hesitant sip, a wave of calm washed over him. He felt his shoulders slump with ease. Alaric wiped sweaty palms along his pants. "I wish to have Lydia back," he whispered in a trembling voice. She studied him over the rim of her teacup before speaking. "Such wishes carry a deathly weight, dearie." "I'll pay any price," he said with more determination, his knuckles clenched white. "The price is not always what one expects," she said, a wry smile curling her lips. "Any price. She was taken too soon." With a sigh, she said, "I cannot bring back the dead." "Please," he whispered, "there must be something you can do." "No." Her tone sent a chill through him. "There is no magic that can undo death. You must learn to live with your loss." Alaric felt as if the ground had been pulled from under his feet. His mind raced, struggling to comprehend her words. Anger bubbled up within him, hot and fierce. "You're a witch. You're supposed to be powerful. I offer you no solace." The chill of her voice was paralyzing to him. Alaric's anger gave way to despair. He felt a lump in his throat, his eyes stinging with unshed tears. He stared at the witch, his mind screaming in denial, but the finality in her voice, the unwavering certainty in her eyes, shattered his last shred of hope. He rose from his seat, his body feeling heavy, his heart even heavier. He stumbled towards the door, his vision blurred by tears. Outside, the cool forest air bit into him, a stark difference to the warmth of the hut. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, his body numb, a thunderstorm rampaging through his mind. Finally, he looked back one last time, half expecting the witch to call him back, to offer him some form of hope. But the door remained closed. With a heavy heart, he turned away and trudged back into the forest. The trees seemed to close in on him, the sounds of the forest echoing his despair. The return journey was silent, save for the hushed whispers of the wind and the faint rustle of leaves. Alaric moved with a slow step, his heart heavy with uncertainty. His thoughts were so consumed with the conversation that he almost missed the sight of the ancient shrine, obscured by dense vegetation and time. Halting, Alaric turned to observe the forgotten structure. It was once beautiful with ornate carvings depicting nature spirits and deities. Now it was a shadow of its former glory, the once vibrant symbols barely recognizable under layers of moss and ivy. There was a melancholic beauty to it, a testament to the passage of time. A soft hum drew his attention to a young girl seated near the shrine. Her eyes were closed, her hands pressed together in prayer. The sunlight filtering through the canopy of leaves played upon her soft features, giving her an ethereal glow. Her simple attire and the devotional beads around her neck suggested she was a shrine maiden. Drawn in by her serene aura, Alaric stepped forward, his footsteps muffled on the mossy ground. The girl opened her eyes at his approach, a welcoming smile gracing her lips. Inclining her head in greeting, the young shrine maiden spoke, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "Welcome, traveler. My name is Neve. I tend the spirits of this old shrine. What brings you to such a lonely path?" Alaric hesitated, taken aback by the question, then decided to be honest. "I sought the Witch of Eldenwood," he said, his voice a soft echo. "I hoped she could end my suffering." Neve nodded with a look of understanding. "Grief is a heavy burden to bear. It's natural to seek an escape." "But she denied me," Alaric admitted, his voice choking with despair. "She said she could not help. Now, I am left without hope." Hope is not always found where we expect it. Grief is a journey, not a destination. It's not about erasing the pain, but learning to live with it, to find peace in memories instead of sorrow. Her words, though simple, struck a chord within Alaric. He looked at her, studying her features, and saw a reflection of Lydia in her serene gaze. It was like looking into the past, seeing Lydia again at that age, full of wisdom and kindness. The resemblance brought him an unexpected comfort. "Life is a balance of shadow and light," Neve continued, her voice gentle in the growing twilight. "Without sorrow, we would never truly appreciate joy. You've lost your way in the shadows, but that doesn't mean you can't find your way back to the light." Listening to her, Alaric felt an understanding glimmer in his heart. Her words offered him a ray of hope amidst his despair, a path forward in his journey of grief. "Thank you, Neve," he said. "I should be on my way." As he turned to leave, Neve approached him. Her gaze was tranquil as she cast a last look over the shrine. "I have finished tending to the shrine for today," she announced. "Would you mind if I accompany you through Eldenwood? It's been long since I walked its paths during twilight." Taken aback yet pleased by her proposal, Alaric nodded, a grateful smile tugging at his lips. As they set off into the deepening twilight, Alaric felt a burden lift from his shoulders, the weight a little less crushing than before. He was not alone. Strolling through the forest, Alaric felt an unexpected tranquility envelop him. The once menacing rustle of leaves underfoot now played a soothing melody, while the distant hoots, once a harbinger of unseen threats, now echoed like a lullaby in the night. The forest, once a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty, seemed to breathe with them, its rhythm in sync with their steps. Neve walked quietly beside him, her presence a calming balm against the forest symphony. Her silence was not one of indifference, but of understanding, offering him the space to let his thoughts flow unguarded. Words he hadn't realized he'd been holding back found their way to his lips, carried on the gentle whispers of the forest. He spoke of his past, his years as a guardsman, the simple pleasures of life in their quiet town. And with a tender ache in his heart, he spoke of Lydia, the radiant smile that had always greeted him at the end of a long day, the warmth of her hand in his, the light in her eyes that had dimmed far too soon. "You know, she had this way of making everything seem brighter," Alaric found himself sharing, a wistful smile crossing his features. "She could take the most mundane day, and with just a few words she'd make it feel like a grand adventure. I miss that. I miss her." Alaric's words echoed in the forest's stillness, his heart throbbing with sorrow. And yet, it was somewhat lighter, the overwhelming pain of loss lessening slightly under the soothing balm of shared remembrance. As they journeyed through the expanse of Eldenwood, Alaric's tales of yesteryears livened their days and filled their nights. Their path was illuminated not just by the flickering campfire at night, but also by his vivid recollections, his words painting scenes of contentment and warmth. The feeling of joy, long since forgotten, seemed to return, if only in fragments. Each spoken memory acted like a salve, subtly lessening the oppressive weight of grief. Under the star-dappled forest canopy, their nighttime reprieve by the fireside offered a sanctuary, a sacred space where Alaric felt free to let his emotions flow. Neve, with her understanding eyes and gentle smiles, remained a constant, her presence a comforting balm. As he shared stories of Lydia, he couldn't help but notice the striking resemblance between the two. Neve's serene gaze, her soft laughter, even the way she tilted her head when she listened. It was like seeing Lydia when they were children. This resemblance, far from causing pain, brought an unexpected comfort. It was as if Lydia herself was there with him, listening, understanding. Throughout it all, a profound sense of connection and healing began to take root. Eventually, the thick canopy of Eldenwood thinned, the quaint houses of Caldera coming into view under the soft glow of the moon. They had finally arrived. It was the dead of night. The streets were quiet and the townsfolk safely nestled in their homes. The journey, though long, seemed to pass in the blink of an eye, the shared companionship and conversation easing the path. They stood on the outskirts of the town, the soft moonlight casting long shadows around them. Alaric turned to the young maiden, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Neve," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "Thank you for listening, for your words. They've given me much to think about." A soft, knowing smile touched her lips. She gently shook her head, her eyes twinkling mysteriously under the starlight. "Alaric," she said, her words carrying a strange resonance, "Lydia was a wonderful person, and she will always live on in your heart. Cherish those memories, but don't let them chain you to the past. Life is a gift, and it's meant to be lived. The sun always rises after the night, no matter how long and dark. Remember that and find your light." Her words echoed in the silence, carrying a sense of peace and promise. A wave of comfort washed over him. The memories of Lydia no longer brought him pain, but solace. He realized he was ready to face life again, to face the world without Lydia by his side. He turned to thank Neve, but found her gone. In her place, a small white flower lay, its petals glowing softly. He picked it up, its delicate form a stark contrast to the turmoil he had felt. The witch's words echoed in his mind, a riddle that now seemed to unravel. "A price is not always what one expects," she had said. As he looked at the flower, a smile creased his lips. "Thank you," he whispered,